welcome back to another episode of the Poultry Network podcast. My name's Tom Willings.
And I'm Tom Woolman.
Tom, good morning. We're back.
We are back, and you're back. You know,
well,
missed
exactly.
you
Some of us
last
never
week.
left. Yeah, and some of us had minor technical difficulties. So apologies for anyone that was missing my monotonous droning.
Well, I was going to say, I thought most people tune in to listen to you, not to me. So they
I think
will
that's
have been
absolute
sorely
nonsense, and we
disappointed.
both know it.
I think we've got a little niche, haven't we? We've got people that listen because they're interested in the poultry sector, and then we have a niche of people that just like looking at two bold blokes chatting away to each other.
I think that second one is a very, very small niche. I'm going to add a third there, and that's the people that are listening because they're told to, because there's a movement I've become aware of, and I'm going to give a little shout out here to a colleague, Laura. Laura knows who she is. Who has been driving around the countryside, meeting farmers left, right, and centre, as is her employment, and in every conversation, introducing the Poultry Network podcast. So, Tom, you and I, and Jake, particularly Jake, whose business this is, owes Laura a huge debt of gratitude. Laura, we thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, and I hope to bump into you one day myself. I'm sure I will.
I'm sure we can make that happen. And for those of you listening that want to listen to Tom Woolman today, bad news. It's an egg episode. So yeah, we should say that we're joined today by Barry Jackson. Many in the egg industry will know the name if you don't know the person, Barry Jackson. Barry's, we'll get Barry to do an intro of himself, but the self-proclaimed egg man, which makes us walruses, if that is the plural for...
I think so.
I don't know what the plural for a walrus is. I'm not even going to attempt. But yeah, let's, without further ado, welcome Barry. And we're going to have a bit of a around the houses conversation about the state of the egg market. Let's see if we can put one or two difficult questions in Barry's direction and get the sound of experience on the job.
Before we get into the interview with Barry, which is well worth a listen, a quick message from me, Jake Davis, editor of Poultry Network. Firstly, thank you for supporting the Poultry Network podcast. Whether you listen to every episode, share it with colleagues, or have only recently discovered the show, we really appreciate it. We now have a limited number of sponsorship opportunities remaining for the rest of the year. Sponsoring an episode is a straightforward way to put your business in front of a highly engaged audience across the UK poultry sector. Your advert can be recorded by someone from your business, giving it a personal and authentic voice, or we can produce it and record it for you. We'll make the whole process simple, from agreeing the message through to getting it on air. To discuss availability and find out more, you can email me directly at jake@dmediagroup.com. That's spelled D-E-E mediagroup.com. Or you can find all our contact details on the Poultry Network website. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Barry, great to have you with us on the podcast. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Tom. Fine, thank you. How you doing?
Yeah, we're keeping well. I've got a slight change of environment today, regrettably. I feel like I've gone back in time to my old tire business. But yeah,
But on the plus side, Tom, your internet is working, so
well, I'm here for a
that's
start.
an improvement on last week.
Exactly. Decided to turn up for an episode. There we go.
Good.
Well, Barry, we're here today to talk about the egg market at large. All sorts of goings on. Feels like a period of change potentially approaching. But your background, we'll get you to do a bit of an intro in a moment. But kind of background is as much in processing as it is in wider shell egg market, and we're really keen, I think, to hear what's been going on in the processing world, and perhaps why some of the summer surpluses, the seasonal downturn in shell egg, isn't translating into just pop it into the breakers this summer. Different conversations afoot, but. Give us a headline, Barry, for your background in the industry, because you've got a rich history.
Well, thanks for the invite, chaps. It's nice to participate. I'm a big fan of the site, and
That's
I
why we
watch
brought
your
you on, of
ramblings
course.
every week, and yeah, it's really good to get the invite. Nice to be involved. So thank you. So yeah, I'm an egg man. Equally, I've been selling shell egg and processed egg now for goodness knows how many years. I started off my career at with Golden Lake, which sort of went into the Dean's episodes, and then worked with Russell Brothers in Lincolnshire with Lodge Farm Eggs, and helped build that business up. Worked in Europe for a while, and came back. I was chief executive of Central Egg Agency. Found a member of the Egg Cell Co-operative, which I'm really proud of, and then MD at Bumble Whole Foods, and more recently have helped farming enterprises move from farming businesses to sort of food companies with the introduction of processing plants, building processing plants and manufacturing lines. More recently, I've spent most of my time, really because of the market, I guess, helping customers source supply and look at what the arrangements are for actually sourcing egg and securing supply, building relationships and integrated supply models. So yeah, it's a really interesting time, isn't it, at the minute?
And it sounds as though you are perfectly placed to give insightful commentary on exactly what's going on. So how do you read the market today, Barry? Let's start with that.
Well, I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it, that we look at the wholesale market as a starting point, which I guess is really what's driving the conversations at the minute. And we sort of forget really that it's a comparatively small size of the market when you look at facts and figures and market analysis, but actually it's much greater than its some parts of its total sort of influence in so much as there aren't that many buyers, but their influence across the market, once the market moves, and I think that's why it's such a talking point at the minute, because over the last 4 years or so, we've seen a very good market, a very strong market, good demand, increasing demand against a limited supply base, and the resulting financial benefits of that. And the wholesale market all of a sudden this summer has found itself offered surplus that it's not had for a while, and again you get that corresponding impact on values, which brings the prices down, which suddenly galvanizes attention when we see that eggs aren't perhaps worth as much money as they have been over the last few years. It obviously takes time to filter through, as we saw when the market increased in spring 2022, when we saw this change, this sub change, which settled in. We have got used in years gone by to seeing this bounce in the market, this fluctuation, where the graph goes up and down and then up and down and up and down. And more recently, we've seen this stability. So we suddenly get that instability, oversupply, and corresponding falling prices. And that's when it starts to impact.
Is it fair to say, Barry, looking back over the past few years, there was definitely a crunch, wasn't there, in 2022? But actually, since that point, and when the market responded with the high prices that producers have enjoyed for the past couple of years, much as it is difficult to get planning permission and to build new sites, production capacity in the UK has been steadily growing over that point. And I think I read in the Ranger this month that actually production capacity is at 50 million birds in the UK. It's the highest it's ever been.
Yeah. We're something like 7 million birds housing capacity up on where we were in 2022, and 8 million birds placed more than we were in 2022. So part of the story around 22 was, there were these buildings standing empty as producers said, I can't afford, or I'm not willing to place birds and make a loss. And so you saw chick placings fall, you saw egg availability reduce. We had a very, very long shadow of a wholesale market with absolutely nothing trading, and really arbitrary numbers as to the value of eggs, simply because there wasn't actually anything that could physically change hands. And I think what's interesting this year is now, for the first time, there is meaningful volume being offered. My take on the wholesale market prices of the summer is that actually they still stand scrutiny against any of the previous years. You know, the value of egg it remains. It's simply that the relative movement from the peaks when there was very little availability is so stark. You know, it's wholesale prices of, depending on the grade and whether colony or free range, basically halved in the course of the last 3 months, but they remain, my take anyway, um, uh, fair value compared to summers of yesteryear. You know, back before 2022, summer wholesale values were painful as a seller.
Absolutely. I think what caught everybody out, Tom, I think you're absolutely right. But I think the story was how quickly it dropped and
Yeah,
what that impact was and how fast the prices began to drop off and how much egg was then actually offered onto the market. I think
and
that's what
Barry,
caught everybody out. We've seen it so many times before, but not more recently. You know,
yeah, and
that was
you're
it was a sudden step change in the taste of in the feel of the market. Bearing in mind, although we've had a really, really, quite a hot summer, quite with lots of heat waves, I think it was comparatively late arriving, and even up until the end of May, beginning of June, consumption was really very good. It was that sudden drop off, and you're right. There was more egg being offered against the demand that dropped off, and sales and orders weren't perhaps as tasty as they and weren't as firm as they had been.
yeah,
So I think what was notable, and I talked earlier on about the impact of the wholesale market and how it's bigger than the actual size of the market itself. It is that sort of signal that, hang on, are the good days over? You know, have we hit that wall that we, as eggmen, we always tend to look towards? You know, we're a bit of a cynical bunch sometimes, and if the prices are good, how long is it going to last? And that was the impact. I think that's why it became such a talking point.
yeah. One thing I've observed or I've listened to, or at least I think I've heard this summer, has been that the processors have been declining the opportunity to buy egg, which seems at odds. You know, if availability has been so challenging in recent years, and the price has fallen to such an extent in a really short space of time, and a lot of that is put down to slack retail demand, perhaps because consumption habits have changed in the face of the hot weather that you've talked about, and perhaps it's simply around total availability and the growth in the flock base. Who knows whether it will be a short term or a long term surplus? But yeah, typically of old, I would expect the processors to be filling their boots and putting a load of egg into storage for when the market tightens or is anticipated to tighten in quarter three, quarter four. Doesn't seem to be the case. Why might that be?
I think that they probably filled it very quickly. I think that, that you look at the bigger processors that do have that storage capacity. I think the nature of the market this summer has been such that they were filled up very quickly. And of course, you've got an industry that's cut its cloth accordingly as well. And egg availability over the last 4 years has been very tight. Egg for processing has been very high. You look at the history of processing in the UK, and in the early days, not so long ago, really, a lot of the egg that went into processors was going in at below cost of production. It was a sector that really was there to mop up. I always think of it in terms of not sending your egg to the processor, but sending your egg to the breaker. And the breaker nuance is one that's where you sent everything that you couldn't use anywhere else. I mean, the breaking sort of side of that aspect, we've seen more of this summer because the processors have been able to fill their stores up very quickly. But once they're full, they're full. And if their sales are not correspondingly buoyant, if there is any kind of downturn in their sales, of course, that stock situation will build. And if you've got your stocks full as a processor, it's good that you've been able to buy perhaps at the right money. But if it's still sat in a store, it's still costing you money. You've got to watch it very, very closely that your levels are correspondingly building your stock for when you need it. But if your sales aren't there, or if you've tailored sales because of availability previous to that fall off in the market, it's that very delicate balancing aspect. Of course, it's not relevant to the shell egg industry. Their egg in is egg out. It's the faster you move it, not only from a quality point of view, but from a financial point of view, you've got to keep egg moving all the time. On the breakers, on the processing side, it's a different structure from that point of view. But you're right, you will have seen processors push back because they don't need it, probably because they've got their stocks are full. And they've reached that point of balance where egg out, egg in.
Have they changed it?
That
I mean,
delicate balance there.
you talked about sort of the processors perhaps cutting their cloth accordingly. Is that to say that there's been a change in the activity within processors, different products, different customers, different size businesses? We've obviously seen processors change hands as well. You mentioned Bumble Hole, now a European-owned business, part of the Hardman Group. So are those sorts of changes, are they creating a shift in the overall demand for egg
I think that you look at more recent projects, and I think it is interesting to see that the focus is on value added, and you'll see processors now searching for more and more solutions with food manufacturers, as opposed to supplying liquid whole egg, which is still at the core of the industry. It's still
Barry,
the core of the business.
Is that changing the sort of egg they want to buy then as well? Does that mean that they're not
potentially? Yes. Traditionally, as I say, if you send all your seconds and farm seconds and everything else to the processor, if you talk to processing now, certainly in the more recent projects, this need for a product that's good enough for yolks, whites, splits, blends, salts, sugars, and solutions where you can mix the product again. The discussions with food manufacturers, there's a lot more focus, I think, on helping your customer with solutions that some of that work is done for them. So what they're ordering is not necessarily just a raw material, just a whole egg product. It's a product solution. And if you think about where the egg products market's going, and we've seen you've seen the introduction, for example, of the Starbucks egg bite, which has been really successful for them.
I was going to say
You've seen the collaborations,
omelets. There's been enormous growth in boiled eggs in pots. For protein as a trend, or healthier eating around snacking, lunchtime, whatever it might be.
Which is where there's huge growth. That's where the opportunities are.
A boiled egg needs to be graded, because it needs to be a certain size. It's got a very precise cook time and a specification for what it needs to look like when it moves on to the next stage in the process.
Exactly that.
And that doesn't correspond with, oh well, I've got a mountain of egg and I've just got to get it off the floor, and can someone buy it from me? Please, don't you really care what the price is? Those two things are not the same.
Right. Can I ask a question? There's been an awful lot of talk, certainly over the last year, over the past couple of years, internally, about concern over levels of imports into the country, and imports have been, I guess, responding to the market signals within the UK, where we have been short of eggs, and we've been able to source products from outside of the country. With this potential change in the market, what is the impact potentially going to be on imports coming into the UK? How do you expect this to play out over the next couple of months?
Yeah, well, again, the import market, the guys who are importing, whether it be on the shell egg side for wholesale trade or independent trade, shall we call it, on that side, that's, as we said, that's as a need to meet their demand. The processed and the imported product. I mean, you're right, Tom. Boiled egg is a great example. The boilers have been really challenged, and we've seen changes of ownership in the boiled egg market as well, of course. And it is a growing market that's been challenged by supply. You need graded egg for boiling, and being able to keep a boiler going, that's a great example of where you need integrated supply. If you're independent, in other words, if you haven't got a production base and you're having to go out into the market to buy that egg, that's a challenge. You're not going to be able to do it. But the boiling market has been increasing. The boiled egg market need has got traction, obviously, not just in the whole egg sector, in the market for whole egg, but also sandwich fillings, egg mayonnaise, and so on. So that's a great opportunity to bring egg in from a European market that some would argue was way ahead of ours in the first place anyway. Quite a sophisticated setup across Europe for boiled supply.
I would add in here as well that you think about a factory needs reliable, secure, intake at the appropriate quality standard. If it is simply not available domestically, and therefore imported egg, imported raw material is has to be brought in. Once those supply lines are established and there are commitments there to secure that volume, because let's remember that this is not just a national shortage that we've gone through in the last few years. It's been European wide, and it's been global with other influences, especially AI. Those supply lines, they don't just get turned off as soon as there is a surplus here and we can renationalize supply. There's got to be a period of time for those contracts to come to an end. So security of supply would have been a genuine concern for those businesses that of old would have had the ability to buy British if they wanted to buy British, and price would have come into that as well. But where simply that opportunity does not exist, unsurprisingly, there's a bit of a tail to be worked through, and then the British product has got to compete its way back into favour. It's not going to happen overnight.
How much?
No, it's not, and this is the conversations that have been going on for the last few years now. If there is anything that has happened from a positive point of view, perhaps in the egg job over the last few years, is it has made buyers look very closely at how they structure their supply arrangements and how much more of an involvement they need, particularly, even back to the producer, where they're talking about securing supply and getting a trading relationship, even if it's a roundtable discussion between a processor, a packer, and a producer. These discussions have become far more nuanced and far more detailed and far more long-term as well.
Well, let's turn to the producer, because I think the question that is doing the rounds at the minute, and we'd love to get your take on it, is what does it all mean for producer prices, farm gate prices, whether it's a packer or it's a processor? Those buyers are looking at the wider market and thinking values are falling. How long will it be? What are people waiting for? What will the triggers be that lead to an adjustment in the price that farmers are receiving today?
Yeah, it's a really deep subject, this one, isn't it? Because, as I say, the discussions have moved on so much now, and we need to take advantage of that, I would suggest, to be able to work far more closely with our customers, no matter what sector or part of the trade that you're in. I think that you've seen, we touched on, didn't we, earlier on about feed contracts and cost of production. And of course, any buyer will want to talk to you about that when it suits them. The reality of it is, as you separate the discussion from cost of production to worth of egg, to value of egg, that's where the conversations begin to sort of part company. And it's about securing supply and add a value. Going forward, I think the opportunity is, from a buyer's point of view and from a producer's point of view, if the opportunity right now is to restructure those trading arrangements and plan for the future. I think as we see more egg availability leading to less value attached to the product, we're going to have to really work hard at sciencing the egg. It's always in the numbers, isn't it? Any deal's always in the numbers, and how we analyse the hell out of egg production. And I think looking forward, you'll see more and more collaboration, I think, which there needs to be. I think you'll see more and more joined up supply deals and arrangements, not just tied, not to balance off the cost of production and make sure that that's secure, but also to protect about influence of things like bird flu and things like that, where you create a pool of product that secures supply. You've also got to look then at value added. If it's on the shell egg side, there's opportunities in branding, whether it's environmental impact, whether it's animal welfare, whether it's rare breeds, whether it's whatever kind of benefit that we want to attach to a brand. I know there's lots more talk now about regionality, and which is part of the environmental impact story as well, of course. And that's where perhaps collaboration will come in with farmers in regional areas with a badge on a product that says it's from that region, working, leading the conversation with the retailer in conjunction with the packer. And similarly with processing, there's more and more science going into that as well, pasta egg and colouring of yolks and so on and so forth. So there's some really big discussions to be had. All of those discussions about how do we add value to the product, how do we secure supply, and how does everybody come out of this winning? We can't go back to that sort of arrangement where buyers would think it's easy to just let the next egg man come into the office and drop his price. We don't want to go back to those bad old days, and we've got an opportunity to build that, to build on that now. So I think looking forward, it's about adding value. There's projects where producers are looking at not just packing operations, but also manufacturing and processing lines, more integrated supply, where the great benefit there is you've got the egg. It's then what do you do with it? What do you do with it that adds value, that isn't just simply sending the egg off to a packer at a given price that can fluctuate. You put the birds in, and at the end of the contract, you don't even know what you're going to be getting for that egg. And I think that's the challenge going forward. That's what we've got to seize on, is how do we add value? How do we secure supply, but how do we add value, and how does the producer feel secure?
So what you're almost saying, Barry, is that actually, as opposed to being an existential threat, what this market change might be is actually an opportunity for the processors and the producers to put their heads together and get really smart about
I think it's
how can they add value to what they're doing.
Yeah, I think I think those conversations are happening. I think the guys that are going to come out of this, the right end, are the guys that recognise that they've got to look forward, and that's how we do that. We add value to the product, but not only the product, but through the relationship and through the supply structure. What is it we can do to invest in our industry? In the past, where you've had margins cut and you're producing egg barely at a profit, and yet we've still got to tick all the boxes. We've still got to do all the codes of practice. We've still got to do all the audits. At a packing station, you've got to train your staff. You've got to pay them well. You've got to run a fleet that's clean and well maintained, and the customer wants the egg delivered on a brand new lorry with a driver that's skilled at handling eggs, which is a job in itself. They want all of that, but they didn't want to pay for it. And what we've seen over the last few years now is probably as a result of that. I mean, before the price went up in spring 2022, Tom, you will know there was a lot of discussions warning buyers that this was coming round the corner, and there was no fat on the bone. If there was going to be a problem, or if we were going to suffer a bad winter of AI, guaranteeing supply was going to be a big question mark. Obviously, we didn't predict the Ukraine war, but once all of that happened, and all the costs went through the roof, and producers simply stopped producing because they weren't just not breaking even, they were losing money hand over fist. And packers were doing all of this work, but not seeing any real reward for it. And that's when it's hit the wall. And I think that was a step change, wasn't it? And what we've had over the last 4 years is this opportunity to invest in the industry and to actually look at the future of the industry, and how do we make sure that we protect it against those bad old days. This summer has been a bit of a catalyst to discussions around the fact that suddenly price drops can impact on the market. We saw this in the States. It was a political discussion at one point that eggs were so expensive, and now they've hit a real wall. Even notwithstanding some horrendous AI outbreaks over there, they've seen egg prices, values drop immensely,
absolutely collapse,
tremendously.
Yeah.
And that's a huge lesson that we've got to learn. We look towards the European side. Okay, we're not having to, 10 years past Brexit, we're on our own in that sense. But we've still got to mirror the fact, and we've got to recognise the fact that we have to invest in the industry. We have to invest and make sure that we do things better. And there are a lot of concerns around, you guys have talked before about some of the challenges that we've got in animal welfare, male chick culling and beak trimming and all these other different conversations that are going on. That as the buyers get into discussions and talk about supply, they're the kind of subjects that they also want to be talking about as well, from a very constructive point of view. But how do we do this? This shift from colony to barn, when we started the journey, people are really, and I would suggest we're still in that conversation now. Does our shopper understand what a barn egg is? where does barn sit and where is it going to find its level? We've had a lot of conversations about that in the wholesale trade. Where does barn sit?
That
Why
is
can't
another
I still get
podcast
colony eggs?
altogether, Barry. I think the progression toward barn and what's coming next. I think perhaps we'll revisit that
Yeah.
when we hear from the government on their consultation. I think self-imposed deadline of the 31st of December for some feedback. So I'm pretty sure the proposals for the cage ban included some activity from the 1st of January 2027. So the clock's
But what's
ticking,
that
and
going
we
to
shall
look
have
like?
to
I mean,
get you back.
the consumer, as we've seen, is buying, Eastern European imported product. And there's a question mark over its provenance at that. But it's still got a market. We've got discussions going on around that too. You've got an economy that's challenged with very little light at the end of the tunnel, really, if you talk to many politicians about where we're going to be going. We've got to seem to be addressing that situation. We're adding value and we're talking to our retailers, but the price of eggs, goes up. Cheap colony coming in is a temptation. It comes in at a price. And many people in the egg job will say over the years, the only time I've ever really made any money out of the egg job is when the rest of the economy is almost grinding to a halt. Cheap protein.
I think that's almost exactly where we could sort of conclude things, Barry, and it's going back to that point, is that when things are grinding to a halt, potentially that's your opportunity, isn't it? If you're switched on to look at what you're doing and move in the right direction and structure your business in the right way to meet those challenges, that's how you get through it, and that's how you succeed.
Thank you so much. It's been too long until we've managed to welcome you onto the podcast. We will definitely get you back. And
Great pleasure, guys.
I've
got a feeling we could carry on like this for hours, couldn't we?
We could. But thank you for joining us. And
Not at all.
yeah,
all the very best, guys. Thank you.
thank you.
Bye-bye. Well, I just feel incredibly lucky, Tom, that we managed to get Barry on the podcast, because I was reflecting that I think this is a topic which I've heard quite a few people talking about, even in my rounds going around broiler farms, actually, over the past month. There's whisperings and people are aware that things are just starting to change a little bit with the egg job. But yeah, we're very lucky to have Barry, because he's in a position where actually he can be a little bit more vocal on some of these topics than other people would be, So yeah,
He was very generous with his thoughts there. I'm smiling because I can feel a series coming on, Tom. I think we can get Barry back. We mentioned the DEFRA consultation, and whenever the outcome of that comes along, because that's going to shape the system of production balance, and his views on that would be fascinating. But he's just got such a wealth of experience.
I was just thinking about that, and that was one question I didn't get a chance to ask, is with the transition to cage free, or a cage ban, to put it like that, which we are expecting at some point. Is the market already factoring that in, or actually is that going to be a help? Is that a section of the market which can drop out if the price signals aren't sending the right messages?
I'm going to bypass the question, and we'll save that for Barry for the next time that we do get him on. I want to go back to the overall direction of price that we touched on toward the end, because perhaps it's an unfair question to put to any contributor. It is, I'm sure, what boardrooms in retailers and egg businesses, whether it's packers, processors, are wrestling with. Is the current lull in demand and the softening of the wholesale market, is that a corner turned, or is that a seasonal shift that's about to be reversed? And it feels as though there's a little bit of a waiting game going on. But it's not just will there or will there not be, for these buyers of eggs, the opportunity to see some reduction in the price that they're paying, and of course for farmers at the other end of that equation, some bad news about the price that they're receiving. I think we've got now, since, you know, big changes in the value of eggs, but also the contractual terms by which eggs are traded. We've got a very, very uneven playing field, all sorts of different contracts, fixed contracts in terms of price by grade, fixed contracts in terms of prices for, you know, up to maybe 5 years even. And, and then also the usual ratchet mechanisms for whether it's feed or feed plus maybe pullet or labor or power, maybe a complete cost of production reference in the value and in the mechanism by which prices are going to change. And I think how all of those moving parts, and of course, there's also just good old fashioned supply and demand. The market's tight, your prices are going up, the market's, you know, weakened, and therefore, regrettably, we're going to have to reduce price. Every business that's buying eggs from farmers, or a multitude of different farmers, I'm sure, has got a spectrum. And how that will play out, the equalities, or rather the inequalities of that, and how it will then wash through into retail, and how retail buying prices themselves convert into shelf front prices that the consumers see. I think that is that. I mean, that's probably a 5-hour podcast. We do a conference on that, Jake. There's an idea for you. But yeah, I
The
think
devil is really in the detail. And I was listening back to the podcast we did with Graham Atkinson in August of last year, and we were talking about contracts. And I asked the question about having a cost of production plus contract, and surely this is just a bit of a license to print money. And we were talking then, and bearing in mind this was a year ago, and we had some disruption with AI and with supply, didn't we, over winter? But we were talking a year ago about how long is this going to last. So this has sort of been a very, very long time coming, and it's gradually and it is gradually changing. So hopefully, whether you're a producer or whether you're a packer or a processor, you're looking at the market, and people have been looking at the market, and I just hope that people respond in a positive and a constructive way, and contracts aren't just, you know, ripped up and we're back to the bad old days, as Barry was talking about.
Yeah, goodness me, we all hope that is the case. Yeah, or we have learnt nothing. We have learnt nothing, and that would be a desperate shame. Time will tell. It is the end of August when we are recording this, and I suspect September will be a pivotal month. So we will watch with bated breath.
Well, change is certainly in the air, isn't it? I've had a dose of rain. You've had a dose of rain.
Let's do a quick couple of plugs before we sign off for the week, Tom. We are only a fortnight or so away from the 3rd of September and the Poultry Network Live conference, again at Harper Adams University. So if you haven't got your ticket, get online and booked up, and look forward to seeing you there in the lecture theatre with some fantastic speakers, including your good self as the chairman of the poultry meat conversations. So look forward to that. And then if you're not already subscribed to these podcasts, then we would love your company. So yeah, please remember to, as I say, like and subscribe, and follow us along on our path.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, until next week, Tom.
Enjoy
Goodbye.
yourself, and we'll catch up very soon.